Okay. So this is going to be fun. I'm going to mix metaphors. I hope I don't offend anybody by using a lot of sports analogies, but in my opinion, private equity backed executives are, in fact, the professional athletes of the business world. So I feel like it's appropriate and fitting. So I describe, the opportunity here is to build better bullpens or more flexible benches, or perhaps a better rotation of perfect fit operators. So that's what we'll be talking about here today. First of all, I'm going to talk about the problems we're solving for the private equity backed executives here, the operators in the group. And then we'll get into the private equity professionals on the GP side, the board side. So, number one, when a private equity management team is extremely successful, what do? The definition of success is creating value efficiently, right? So, when you do that and you lead a business towards exit, and maybe you survive the liquidity event, guess what? Within a quarter, 40% of a typical management team is out of a job. There we go. How long was I on mute? Did I do something? Okay, well,
After you
Joyce is
said out
muted.
of a
My
job,
fault. Sorry. Go ahead. Where did he stop?
right when he
Out
said
of
after you're out of a job.
somebody up in the heavens didn't like me saying that. So 40% typically are out of a job through no fault of their own, I would add. It's typically, as you know, because the larger private equity group that does the acquiring typically brings in their own CFO and or their own CEO. And those people typically want people around them that they know, like, and trust, right? So it makes sense. So if you are a CFO who was not brought in by the larger private equity group, but rather you were the incumbent CFO, you've done nothing wrong, but you're patted on the back and told to go away, right? That's typically the way that works, and that starts the cycle of what I call career transitions. So those who've been in private equity long enough know that on average, maybe every 36, some people would say it's a little longer than that, months or so, you're in a period of career transition. It's just the nature of the beast. It's part of working in private equity. It's not fun, but that's just the way it goes. And the other dilemma or problem that we're solving for here is that networking with private equity groups, private equity professionals, is not easy. they, they're they're not super receptive to people calling them out of the blue. And if you email them a resume, their chances are that's doing them a favor, because it means that in 2 nanoseconds they can delete that email and move on to the next one. So it usually does not work. The last problem we're solving for is that there is this enormous pool, as I said earlier, of proven, skilled, knowledgeable, capable, high level, C-level talent that are not being utilized. I think of this as an inefficiency in a very, very efficient ecosystem that is private equity. So we have the underutilization of highly, highly qualified executives who are eager to prove themselves. So what do we do about that? Well, let's view this from the other side of the equation. Problems we're solving for PE professionals. So their number one, well, I wouldn't say number one, but one of their dilemmas is that executive searches, the process of executive search, is largely unchanged over the last 40, 45 years. They're slow, they're expensive, they're risky. They don't always get it right. Talent mistakes can be significant destroyers of value and can create tremendous inefficiency, right? Expert networks can be inefficient. We're just thinking about talent here. So they could think of talent from a number of different vantage points, hiring talent or utilizing talent as experts or consultants. There are not that many fractional or interim platforms. If we were having this conversation 2 years ago, it would be dramatically different than it is today. The notion of interim or particularly fractional has really gained acceptance in private equity just over the last couple of years. We haven't talked enough about consultants yet. So consultants may do a great job, but they lack the context of working inside a portfolio company under private equity owners. They sometimes misunderstand the context and the vernacular. And private equity groups at the end of the day, they're not necessarily looking for a bigger bench. They don't want to spend more money. They don't want everybody sitting around as W-2 employees. What they want is a nimble, flexible bench that allows them to solve the dilemma of the moment, right? That's an important point, to solve the particular need that they have at this moment in time. So before we go any further, I'm just going to pause. I'm going to do this a few times throughout this discussion. I'm just going to pause and see if anybody has a question, a comment, anecdote, anything they'd like to share, an area of disagreement. Bring it on. I just saw a chat pop up. I didn't see who it was, but I saw Ashburn, Virginia. I used to live in the shadow of AOL in Ashburn, Virginia many years ago. All right. Well, I'm not hearing any questions or comments, so we'll keep going. I'm assuming that we're all good. So if anybody has a quandary, a concern, or pushback on what I'm sharing, just let me know. So the pitch then to private equity groups can be something as simple as, hey, talent is an asset class. You need to be able to deploy it fluidly, efficiently, flexibly, strategically, just like capital. Okay. So the problem from their standpoint is they can't always efficiently find talent. So there are three big challenges, as you probably are aware. Number one is they need capital. They need investors. That's number one. That's at the top of the list. Number two is they need deals, deal flow. And then number three is they need talent to run the companies that they've invested in. So on that third one, the ability for them to find and then reallocate these highly skilled people like yourself who might be in career transition mode, previous private equity experiences, is significant because it allows them to create value more rapidly, more efficiently than they otherwise would. In other words, they're not sitting around waiting for an executive recruiter to find the perfect fit person for the long term. They're looking for somebody to solve a problem now. And the reason that's relevant to you is that if you can solve a problem for them now, even if it's just a short stint, you're developing a relationship. It's kind of like test driving a car. Anybody recognize the photograph on the bottom right? I chose it on purpose. I see some nods. Moneyball. So, this is thinking a little bit outside the box. This is enabling them to source the level, the capability of talent that they would not otherwise have the ability to source if they simply relied on executive recruiters. So, if you focus on the problem and not necessarily finding your next CFO role, and the ability to deploy certainty. In other words, hey, I've been there, I've done that, I have experience, I can solve this problem or this challenge. It can be impactful. And then we're telling them that we're enabling them to gain access to this curated, pre-vetted collective of private equity tested experts, consultants, executives. You could think of them as force multipliers. And the important thing is the way we've structured the platform is you can search, I can search, they, meaning a hiring decision maker in private equity, can search using a number of different really easily search tools. So I know I'm kind of describing something that you're going to have to envision in your head, but you click a button that says members at the top, and then you click on add filter, and you choose an industry, and then you choose a role, and then you choose a number of prior iterations of private equity backed experience, and then you might choose a city, and then you might choose a EBITDA range, and so on and so forth. So whether it's matching by stage, sector, role, or situational knowledge, it just becomes a lot easier. And because many of the operators that are in our particular network or our community are in career transition mode, what does that mean for them? Well, it means if they get to the end of the process and the talent that they're trying to recruit says no, or they get to the end of the process and the talent they're trying to recruit says yes, but I can't leave my job for 6 more months. I can't possibly do that. Then they're SOL. So what we're offering is an opportunity to have dilemmas, problems, quandaries, concerns, challenges solved quickly and efficiently. So my recommendations to you, if I think about this from your vantage point, don't start with a role or an area of functional expertise in mind. It's good to start there and have a goal, but the goal may be the end point, and getting from point A to point D might involve maybe a circuitous route, but it may actually be a beneficial route for you. And what I mean by that is if you start with a resource or a solution to a problem solver in a particular area, particular industry, particular situation, particular size range, that can be beneficial for you. I'm looking at John Ferrara. I won't call on you, John, but John's a member of the operators, and he's listened to an executive coach that we have inside our community. She's a former executive, KKR backed operator herself. She's an executive coach, and she talks a lot about personal brand. And so the idea here is that when you embark on a career transition, your career transition strategy is probably not very well defined. You probably don't have a process for all the steps that are involved in that. Well, what a experienced executive coach in the world of career transitions would suggest is you need to have a goal. That's the starting point. You need goal alignment. But frankly, the most important step is step 2 or maybe step 3, and that's your personal brand statement. So what do we mean by a personal brand statement? I'm just going to pause and see if anybody wants to jump in and offer a suggestion of how we interpret those words, personal brand statement. This is going to be a lot more interesting if somebody else talks.
What you bring to the table personally and professionally,
Yeah.
what you're known for.
What you're known for. That's perfect. That's even better. What you're known for. Anybody else? Yeah, Tate.
Yeah, the personal brand statement would be what benefit you can provide to the company that you're presenting yourself to. So
Yep.
it needs to be what it needs to be focused on them. What's in it for me? They want to know what's in it for them, and it needs to be tailored specifically to that company or that industry.
Very good. Very good. I'm thinking about an ad campaign from probably the late 70s or maybe the early 80s, and it said membership has its privileges. Does anybody know what the company was?
American Express.
American Express, exactly. So many people in the world of branding would say you cannot brand yourself. You cannot just make a claim, make an assertion, and have it stick. Branding is about influencing the thoughts that people have about you when you're not in the room. And so whoever, I can't remember who or what exactly the words were that were used, but it's really about influencing what people say about you and think about you when you're not in the room. Okay. So you have to develop that statement of where you're most relevant, how you can problem solve, how you can be the most effective tool. And then you have to share it by developing content. Now, that content could be written, it could be videos, could be podcasts, could be things you say in an interview. It could be things you say at a conference when you're speaking or just interacting with other human beings. But the idea is you're looking for somebody in a hiring decision-making role in private equity to have this reaction of, I need somebody that can solve for this particular problem. And there's this guy or there's this woman who keeps posting this stuff that's perfect. Who is that? Who is the perfect person for this? I keep seeing, I can see the logo. I can even picture the person's face. So what you're trying to do is get to the point that that epiphany happens and they say, aha, it was Tate. I need to reach out to Tate. He would be the perfect person for this particular need that we have. We should reach out to him. So in order for that to occur, you have to influence people's thinking by creating, if not content, then influencing them in other ways. And then maintaining and reinforcing that. So when you develop connections and relationships, the ultimate objective is to be not only known, not only liked, but trusted as a relevant resource. Yeah. So at the point that there is maybe an opportunity when they call you up and say, "Hey, we thought of you. We've got this opportunity that it may be a good fit." Don't immediately jump to, "Okay, tell me more about the role." Because it's really not about the role. It's not really about the definition of the role or the responsibilities of the role. It's really about solving the problem that they have. So that's what you're trying to do, is to solve a problem. And that provides a little bit of flexibility for us, flexibility to determine, what the best way to resolve that particular task is. Now, I've got this laundry list here, and I'm just going to take them one at a time because maybe some of you are unfamiliar with some of these terms. An expert call is really, really simple, basic, kind of fundamental stuff. I need to pay somebody for an hour of their time. And maybe it's the first call, maybe is free, but they're basically just trying to determine at the outset if you're relevant for them, and you're trying to prove that you are relevant so that you can continue the dialogue. So the objective here from your standpoint is to be relevant so that you're considered for kind of the next layer or the next opportunity, right? The next opportunity might be a consulting relationship, or it might be you being part of a consulting team. It could be something that's fractional. Let's define fractional versus interim. Fractional, obviously, should be obvious, means it's a role that could be a long period of time. It could have no end date, that takes up a percentage of your time, 25%, 30%, 50%, whatever it is. That's fractional. Interim is, hey, we just lost our CFO. He got sick, and we're starting a search, and we're going to use one of those big, expensive executive recruiting firms, but they're probably going to take 6 or 9 months to get it right. And in the interim, we need somebody to jump in. And that person really needs to have prior experience working in a private equity capacity, in the size range that we're in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a relevant opportunity for you as CFOs and finance professionals. River guide is a term you may not be familiar with. Those are executives that they have some connection with, some relationship with, some rapport with, often that have deep industry knowledge and experience. And they're relying on those river guides to help them as they develop an investment thesis or refine an investment thesis, or maybe even start searching for acquisition candidates. And the intent, at least the way they describe it, in most cases, the intent is that if they do a deal, they're going to align with you and there's a role for you. So they may pay you to be a river guide. They may not pay you. You may be 1099. You could be W-2. There's a wide range. Operating partners, again, I have no idea the level of knowledge, experience that this group has. It's a big crowd. We got 49 people on the call. So what I'll say is operating partners, if we asked 10 operating partners to define the role operating partner, we'd hear 25 different answers, and they'd probably all be correct. So you can't really put a label on it, but I'm going to do it anyway. They're the internal consultants that are hired by a private equity fund to be a sounding board, a wise old sage, a voice of reason, a voice of experience, a best practice resource for the executives running the companies. They typically are hired for one of three reasons. One is they have role specific expertise. They've been a CFO 14 times before, or industry expertise. They've been a healthcare executive throughout their 30-year career, or situational knowledge. They love turnarounds and crisis situations and sinking their teeth into that. So, um, again, there are exceptions, and that's at a high level. That's what an operating partner does. The role of operating partner by many is described as a dream job. There's really no one that reports directly to you. You may or may not be on the board, and you're really just the coach, mentor, sage, consultant, however you want to think about it, which is a cool job for many. The downside is you may not be on the board, and you may be a 1099. And in the cases where you are 1099, you may be a fractional operating partner. And then, of course, what everybody wants is a full-time job as at the C level, but that's not necessarily, don't necessarily go from A to D. And so this is the purpose of today's discussion, is to encourage you to think about all those middle steps in between. Okay. So the rationale, why would you want to do that? If your goal is to be a CFO, why would you waste the time and energy exploring opportunities to be an expert or a consultant or a fractional executive or something of that nature? Well, I'm going to tell you. The first is, it's not a lot of fun to be in career transition mode. It's hard to wake up every day and basically have the job of networking. And sometimes it lasts longer than you expect it to. So stay engaged, use your intellectual horsepower, solve dilemmas. You get the opportunity to test drive a new private equity group and therefore prove yourself to them by being a resource or by solving a problem for them. Test the chemistry, the rapport, the interactions. Is this a group that I could see myself working in on a long-term basis? You get to test them. And of course, they are testing you to decide if they want to continue the relationship. The best part about it is you get to earn compensation while you're in career transition mode. You get to tell people in your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, et cetera, that you're doing something active, which is relevant, and you're solving problems, which is fun. And you're also simultaneously, obviously, being considered for other opportunities. So I'm going to leave you with a couple more thoughts. The first is that you can do this. You can target people in private equity. You can do this on your own. And then once we get past this slide, I'm going to tell you that you can do it as part of a collective of operators inside our community. So let's go through this first. So we talked about what operating partners do, what their role is. As I said, for some people, it's kind of like the dream job in private equity. But from your vantage point, the operating partners are really the conduit. And what I mean by that is they're the eyes and ears for the private equity group. They're not there with the intent of snooping and sussing out, actual problems and reporting back. That's really not their job. Their job is just to make things better. But in the course of their job, they might be aware that, hey, you know what? I have determined, I'm speaking as an operating partner now. They might report in the next board meeting, hey, I have determined that in portfolio company number 3, our CFO is just not going to cut it. And I wanted to let you all know that I think it's wise to start a search for a replacement CFO. So the reason that it behooves you to develop connections with operating partners is they're not necessarily the hiring decision maker, but they're aware of opportunities. They're aware of problems, because part of their job is to figure out where the friction points are, where the misalignment is, where value creation is not being created. And so they're good people to get to know, and they're typically experienced and have typically very, very high EQ, which means that they're open to new ideas, new ways of thinking, and certainly collaborating and networking generally. There are exceptions. So, operating partners. Number 2 is the lower middle market. And again, this is probably sophomoric to some of you, but nevertheless, we'll have to treat this as the lowest common denominator because I don't know the level of experience people have. So to me, lower middle market is roughly 2 to 20 million of EBITDA, maybe 5 to 30 million of EBITDA, somewhere in that range. So the private equity groups that are routinely investing in companies that are, let's say, under 30 million of EBITDA, that's the lower middle market. Why am I pointing out the lower middle market? Because they typically are much more open to developing relationships with people that they don't have a prior relationship with. That's one. Secondly, let's say hypothetically you've worked in businesses that are above 50 million of EBITDA. You are relevant for businesses that are above 50 million of EBITDA, right? But guess what? You're also highly relevant, sought after, and viewed as a superstar to businesses that are, let's say, 3 million of EBITDA. So the lower middle market represents a lot of opportunities. They're more open-minded and they view you, if you have experience in bigger companies, they view you as superstars. Number three, if there is a talent leader inside the private equity group, now these are mutually exclusive. So number two and number three typically do not go hand in hand. Occasionally they do, but talent leaders, chief people officers, chief human resources officers in private equity funds are good people to get to know because they're looking for people like you. You can help them do their jobs more effectively by being a resource for them. So in other words, they might be looking for a CMO. And if you know that and you happen to have a friend or former colleague who's a CMO, try to put two and two together, try to help people out, try to develop a relationship. It may not be a direct path for you to win your next job, but it's an opportunity to get to know someone and develop friendship and a relationship with a talent leader who may eventually think of you, right? And then the last one is kind of a little bit tongue in cheek, but wherever you can gain an introduction, because it's hard to get an introduction in private equity, right? So I'm going to, once again, I'm going to pause here just to see if there are any questions thus far, or if anybody put any questions into the chat, which I'm not seeing. Anything thus far?
John?
Yeah. So, but you do say that a direct mail or email campaign to either any of these people don't really work, right?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, John. Direct mail, email campaigns on a blind basis are really, really hard to make work. So, the least likely way, it's an interesting topic, and so we'll spend a couple minutes on it. What will absolutely almost never work is saying, here's my resume, and just dropping that off cold with no prior connection with them whatsoever. They're going to laugh and throw it away. Creating an email that if they printed it out, it would be like longer than a page long. If they don't know you, they're not going to read that. So don't even bother. They're very short attention span. Get to the point quickly, bottom line up front. And if you do the job well, it's a really pithy, compelling call to action. And I'll give you an example. I have an investment thesis. I know of a few companies in a particular industry segment that could be acquired, and I happen to know owners. That will get their attention. Or maybe something as simple as I am interested in helping you with portfolio company number 4 because I've worked in that industry many times previously and I have a point of view. It has to be very short, very simple, and there has to be a real clear win. What's in it for me, for the private equity side? Good question. So it's better. I'm sorry, John. I'm just gonna say one more thing. It's better to have them develop a connection with you because they've seen something you posted on LinkedIn. Then they saw an article that you wrote on LinkedIn. Then maybe they saw a podcast. Then maybe perhaps you have a personal website and they went there to, grab some information. And then they connected with you on LinkedIn. Boom. They connected with you on LinkedIn. Now's the opportunity to say, hey, I'd like to schedule a quick chat with you. I'd like to learn more about your hiring needs or portfolio company number 4. John?
What about an email campaign or emails from my good friend Tate Purcell, who knows the private equity firm? and Tate sends the, Tate sends the email, I'd like to introduce John Ferrara, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
Is that any
exactly.
better, or does that not work? Or
100 times better. 100 times, literally 100 times better. So the reason is know, like, trust. If they know Tate, like Tate, trust Tate, and by 2 degrees of separation or 1 degree of separation, Tate has facilitated an introduction to you. That's telling them that this is someone that passes the Tate Purcell test, and they're going to take it seriously. So I think I saw a statistic about this just like yesterday. It's something like 94% likelihood that if you introduce someone, like if you, I can't remember how it was structured, but essentially it's a very high likelihood that if you introduce someone to a relevant contact, that they'll respond favorably. It's higher than you would have thought. I think it's at 94%.
so Tate, I'm going to reach out to you later.
Other questions?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to pitch one out. Hello, Kit, and thank you for the presentation. I'm Julie, and I have a curiosity. It seems counterintuitive to hear you say that they'll have time to look for someone's content. They'll look for what might have been published, a book or an article or something about what they might have an issue or dilemma or something, but they won't respond to an email direct. It seems kind of odd. And so my question is, what makes it so difficult to pop into to a warm connection from directly?
A warm connection. So let's
Well, I mean,
first.
a direct connection. Forget about the word warm. Because
Okay.
if you don't have an affiliation, if you don't have an introduction or an affiliate, associate, somebody, then it would be a cold direct outreach.
Yep, exactly. So I'm just going to give you an analogy or a scenario, a fictitious case example. So
Okay.
the person that you want to develop a connection with is Jim inside XYZ Capital Partners. And the dilemma that Jim is experiencing right now is that in one of their portfolio companies, they've done a series of acquisitions, bolt-on, add-on acquisitions, and in 3 or 4 board meetings in a row, Jim has expressed frustration, disappointment that nothing seems to be improving, nothing's developing. And he's basically in his mind, he's saying, I don't know how to put my finger on it. I don't know whether it's a lack of integration. There's no synergy. It's frustrating that we're not seeing the improvement across the board from the acquisition of 3 or 4 companies in 3 or 4 months, and it's just disappointing. Okay, so that's the frustration that he's experiencing.
Okay.
So if you happen to send an email at exactly the right time that says, I am the uniquely qualified individual on the planet to solve for merger integration dilemmas, then his reaction is going to be, oh, can't believe it, how fortuitous. I am going to reach out to her and she is going to help me right now. This is awesome. But
Complete
what are the
serendipity.
chances?
Okay.
Yeah, pure serendipity. So the timing, it's sort of like when you reach out to a recruiter and you say, hey, I am currently in career transition mode. I'm available. And they, if the timing isn't right or the situation isn't right, it's just like ships passing in the night. So you could get lucky, but it's much more likely that when they're facing that dilemma and they're struggling and they're frustrated, that they're on LinkedIn, maybe on their phone, like, all right, why, merger integration problem, what's going on?
Yeah. Okay. I understand. Thank you. It's like a needle in the haystack showing up all of a sudden. Okay.
Yes. That's the dilemma, right?
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Because we've got a couple more slides. Okay. Well, then we'll keep going. So where you fit in as a finance executive, I've got bad news and then I've got good news. We'll start with the bad news. So the bad news, as many of you know, is that most CFOs, almost all CFOs, are promoted from within. First time private equity backed CFOs are rare. It has happened, but it's unusual because you're the sounding board. You're the eyes and ears. You're the person that you're the only person in many cases that speaks their language inside the portfolio company. So they treat the CFO as, well, if not the most important person in the portfolio company, then maybe the second most important, usually the first most important. Incredible amount of oversight. You know, they want to be in the weeds. They want to understand the data way more than they do about any other C-level role. And then it's a tough job. And so it's kind of hard to last. It's a bit of a treadmill. So the bad news is if you're a head of FP&A, for example, and you're thinking about being a CFO, you might just get burned out you might need to take some time off and do something else and then come back. So that's the bad news. The good news is, as I said, you're in demand for interim roles, right? You're in demand because they want people who can be strategic thinkers. Think like a COO, think like a chief strategy officer. They might view you as somebody, if you've done multiple roles, you might be a great CEO because, again, you speak their language. And, it's possible that you could serve roles in a variety of different capacities as well, particularly if you have experience in larger companies and you're trying to do something in a smaller private equity group. So the good news for everybody here is you're not CMOs. You're not CTOs. You're not CHROs. These are roles that private equity groups take far less seriously than CFOs. And for those of you who are GPs in private equity groups, I know I'm overgeneralizing. Okay. So I sort of would like to think of the operators community as front office, a talent support team, as talent scouts. So if we were pitching to a private equity group, we'd say, hey, we really want to collaborate with you to find your utility players, your situational specialists, and to get them signed up in a matter of days. And we want to match expertise to situational inflection points, whether it's immediately post-close or a situation that involves a turnaround or multinational or whatever it is, right? We're solving for a situational pain point. We want to eliminate guesswork, eliminate uncertainty, eliminate risk by finding exactly the right person for the job, situation, industry, role, experience, etc. And so we can offer a wide range of experts. And, in total, there's about 650 members in our community. Of those 650, about 500 are experienced PE-backed execs at the C level. And then you can read down from there. So there's a lot of good, solid talent in our community. And so that's kind of the pitch that I make. And for you, the rationale, either in doing something collaboratively with the operators or doing something like this on your own, is that you get to stay engaged, stay active, use your intellectual horsepower to solve dilemmas, to test drive a new private equity group, to kind of experience what it's like to work with them, prove yourself, and then obviously at the same time be considered for future opportunities, both with them and anywhere else, because you're not locking yourself into a long-term relationship. You're solving a specific problem, developing a relationship, and developing rapport with somebody, earning compensation while you're doing it. Inside our community, the benefits are threefold. Number one, network. We have a few private equity groups that are members of the community at this point, a few trusted advisors, and as I said, about 500 plus PE-backed executives at the C level. So those are the people you can network with very, very easily and efficiently. We have a lot of discussions, and it's an important word. Today is more or less like what I don't like, a sage on the stage preaching to the choir, one-sided communication. I don't like that. So in our community, we tend to make it more interactive and collaborative. People chime in with their own experiences, their own points of view and perspectives, and it becomes essentially like a kitchen table conversation. So that there's benefit in being a part of that. The two big themes of those conversations are value creation and all of their sub pieces. We've identified 11 big levers of value creation, and they fold up into 6 levers that are even bigger. And then career transition. I like numbers, I guess. So career transition has the career transition strategy has 8 process steps. And I can, if any of you are curious about what those 8 are or what the 11 or 6 are on the value creation side, you can email me. My email address is down at the bottom of that screen. And then the third value prop that we haven't gotten to is the ability to collaborate around content. And so by that, what I mean is if you had a question and you didn't have anybody to sort of bounce that question off of, I'll give you a couple examples. I have an interview next week with ABC Capital Partners. I don't know them. Are they good people to work for or not? Should I even bother with the interview? So that's a great example because it's a confidential, safe space. You could bounce that question off of others, see if anybody writes back. That's happened many times. And in some cases, people will say, hey, here's my phone number. Feel free to call me. Let's chat, which is usually not a good sign, but it's usually very helpful. Secondly, people have said, I'll paraphrase, I'm a CFO. I have received a job offer inside a chemical manufacturing business in the Northeast, $350 million in revenue. What level of compensation should I be negotiating for in this particular situation? Another great example of a use case of a Q&A. But we have other content, playbooks, templates, and so on and so forth. So lots of good ways to collaborate with others inside the community. For private equity backed executives, I honestly don't know of anything else like it. That's why I created our community. And I'm going to end the slideshow there by saying, if you have some experience in private equity, around private equity, in the private equity ecosystem, and you've worked at the C level or almost at the C level, feel free to join TheOperators.pe. Or the second offer I'll make for you here is, if I can be a useful resource for you, if I can help you, I get fueled and energized by being a net giver. So I like helping people. So if you want to just email me or reach out in any way, feel free to do so, and I'll do my best to help you. And that might just be an introduction.